So Perumal,
can you hear me, Kazu?
Yes, I can hear you all. Good.
Okay, my sound system is working. That's great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks, the government of Japan, for providing this opportunity for the UNFCCC to provide with an update on where we are with respect to the capacity building work program towards the implementation of Article 6.2 and 6.4. So I did hear the comment from Gareth. So I would, in the end, I would say that what we are planning to do on 6.8 as well. Primarily, this presentation is focused on 6.2 and 6.4, taking into the context of the Article 6 implementation partnership that has been spearheaded by Japan. If you go to the next slide, please. Before jumping in what we are trying to do in 2023 and 2024, and also going forward in 2025, wanted to provide with the context that the UNFCCC Secretariat has been provided with the mandate by the parties through the decisions in Glasgow on to focus on specific areas related to 6.2 and 6.4. Quite a number of people in the call might be quite familiar with this slide, but I also thought that it is better to touch base on the areas that have been identified through the multilateral process, the countries, that areas that needs to be focused on for capacity building through the regional collaboration centers. The first one is in relation to the development of institutional arrangements, including reporting, and then to help parties in ensuring that the cooperative approaches actually support the ambition, and then the help LDCs and SITs in meeting the relevant participation requirements elaborated in the decisions. With respect to Article 6.4, again, it belongs to the institutional arrangements, and in many countries that we have been listening, that probably the agency that would be dealing with who would be responsible for approving the projects in 6.4 is also going to be the institutional arrangement, or the institution that would also be responsible for 6.2 cooperation or for cooperative approaches in general. So here as well for 6.4, one of the focus areas is around the implementation related to the institutional arrangements. And then compared to the Kyoto world, there's a large amount of delegation that has been provided to the host parties if they would like to design and set baselines, taking into the context of the relevant host parties in terms of identifying which type of methodological approach they wanted to approve for an activity to participate in Article 6, or how long that the crediting should be allowed for a given type of activity from a given type of sector within the country. If a host party choose to do so, it can undertake such kind of action. So that's another area where the parties wanted or asked the Secretariat through the regional collaboration centers to provide capacity building. And the last part is about the capacity building related to the support of the transition. The rules became quite clear in Sharm el-Sheikh that if countries do wish, there are about 3,300 plus activities from the CDM would potentially be eligible to transition into Article 6.4. So there's a big work program that would be executed by the Article 6.4 supervisory body, for which the supervisory body would be considering the concept note in their upcoming meeting in the month of March, in the first week of March. There's a separate track which would be working purely on the support and assistance towards the transition of existing activities as mandated when the funds were allocated through the CMP. If you go to the next slide. So this is like to say that the steps that have been undertaken so far, like, so we are not starting for vacuum, and also as colleagues from IGES and MOE has presented, similar to the same time as when the first conference of the Article 6 implementation that has begun last year in February, March, the UNFC Secretariat has conducted 3 regional virtual dialogues through the regional collaboration centers in identifying the needs, because we do have a broader mandate that came from the multilateral process. But to strengthen and to make a needs assessment, the Secretariat undertook 3 virtual regional dialogues covering all the 6 regions, which would cover close to 140 plus or 150 countries. Then the Secretariat has also launched a survey on the capacity building needs, which has been circulated to all the 197 parties to identify again the needs. And there were like different inputs that came from different parties, but also that the survey was also extended to diverse set of stakeholders, development organizations, and other institutions, including through the regional collaboration centers. So once we have received these needs from these different stakeholders, we presented them and validated the status of the work plan with both parties as well as the supervisory body in different forums that made available. The subsidiary body side event last year, June in Bonn, the DNA forum meetings that happened in the margins of the climate weeks in Africa and Latin America. And then the supervisory body has also specifically been provided with the work plan related to the general implementation of Article 6. And then the work, despite the needs work was done, as a formality, this was launched at COP27, the capacity building work program by the UNFC Secretariat through the regional collaboration centers. If you go to the next slide. If you look at the outlines, I think probably the partners and other friends and colleagues from different organizations that they are going to present, or many of you who are in the call at this moment, I think when it comes to the needs, I think as Gebru was also indicating as a comment and a question before I intervened, the needs is pretty much like quite uniform and standard. Of course, there are individual countries in which there are specific circumstances needs to be taken into account in terms of identifying which type of sectors and other activities might be eligible. But as a general broad way of needs, it's pretty much, if you see all our presentations, probably this is coming quite consistently. So one of the primary things that is coming forward is aligning the Article 6 with the NDC implementation. In the post-Paris world, it's quite important to know the role of exactly how does the Article 6 and in carbon markets in general play within the context of the NDC and its implementation strategies. So there's a large demand that is coming from the host parties in terms of helping them. There are multiple ways, like when NDC revision is being undertaken, our other UN support entities who work in the revision of NDCs, etc., have done some work. But our understanding and our conversations with the countries, it's making clear that people are really looking at the alignment of Article 6 within the NDC implementation as one of the key areas. Beyond the regular reporting, supporting reviews, or like following the exact process that has been adopted by the UNFCCC process, beyond that, they are looking at the macro level on how to align the Article 6 or markets within their NDC implementation strategy, while considering it, if not designed properly, it can create an environmental, negative environmental debt on the emission accounts of the host country. So quite a number of countries are concerned about that. And this is in one area that parties are asking to put a lot of effort. The second one, again, like it's related to Article 6 and other carbon pricing instruments, like it's a bit developed in carbon markets, people who have existing ETS or existing carbon tax systems or any other carbon pricing mechanisms. They also wanted to see the link between Article 6 and the other carbon pricing instruments in the country. For countries which has already been experienced in developing such systems, or countries which are in the process of establishing a carbon pricing instrument, would also like to see how these two interact with each other. And then the third one is, of course, the mandate thing about the legal and the institutional arrangements. because in comparison to, for the developing countries, in comparison to the experience that was there in the Kyoto Protocol when they engaged in markets, as I said, the roles have expanded significantly. So now, if you look at the participation requirements, there is no difference between a buyer country or a seller country as it used to exist in the KP world. So every country has a uniform requirement of the participation requirements to be fulfilled in order to participate in these mechanisms. And that's an onerous task. And that's an onerous task for the host countries. And that's another area where a large demand is coming. And the fourth aspect, I think, there are many countries, and countries might have already identified there are activities in terms of pilot activities that are already undertaken. But if you may have seen the recent example, for example, like India, that came forward with 13 different types of activities under 3 heads as eligible as activities, right? Like, so that's one of their identification of specific activities they would like to authorize for cooperation within the Article 6 as one step forward. The similar way, there are many countries who would like to identify the sectors and activities that would be eligible from their country to participate in order to provide the necessary investment signal and certainty for countries to engage and participate in Article 6. So that was the fourth major outcome from those regional dialogues. If you go to the next slide, please. I elaborated quite a bit about the baseline approaches on Article 6.4. So you would see, I think Gebru was talking about this specific, more clarity is emerging within the Article 6.4 context. Since the rules are getting much more clarified, we had a large implementation decisions that have been taken in Sharm el-Sheikh. So there are questions around the 6.4. You would see the 3 of them: the development of baseline approaches, national arrangements for accreditation of operational entities, transition of CDM to Article 6.4, and also the parties were requesting additional support in communicating to the private sector on the potential of carbon markets, etc. And the last one it's a traditional work that UNFCCC should be doing, which is to provide, like Blueprint is quite commonly used name now. I know some of the alliances that we are working with other partners within this partnership itself has come forward with Blueprint documents. So for sure that, as many has expressed, that there shouldn't be any duplication to the extent possible. So where there are existing blueprints that can be facilitated and used, that would be used by the Secretariat. Otherwise, for example, one simple example, if it is like filling the reporting requirements around the initial report, then what kind of information needs to be provided, what kind of best practice that will be there based on the experience that will be gained under the review process, etc. So such kind of documents is in the plan for the UNFCCC to produce. So, so that is something similar to what our thinking was. There were also a demand that came from parties during the dialogues. If you go to the next slide. So this is from the outcome of the survey, and you could see based on the survey results, these are the top 4 requests. One, still people were asking about, it's clear that because unless that you were in the room where it is being negotiated, it becomes very difficult to understand the nuances of what the language means in terms of decision making. So many countries wanted, in general, whatever we do as a capacity building, as a workshop, or as a training program, quite a focus they are requiring us to do in relation to basically dissecting the decisions that are taken in compartments and explaining to them. And then, similar to what we had from the regional dialogues, issues related to institutional arrangements, authorization transfer, and the baselines are the 3 next most demanded areas of capacity building. If you go to the next slide. The approach that we have taken is to provide with institutional aspects. I think that is where there's a lot of complementarity with what UNFCCC want to do and what this Article 6 implementation partnership is undertaking. If you look at the providing with the availability of the well-structured information, helping with the institutional arrangements, and also to look at various training workshops, help desks and courses, etc., to provide those information towards the capacity building program. Kazu, if I may ask, how many minutes I left? I have quite a number of slides to go, so I will rush.
Yes, yes, we have another two, of course, important presentation from World Bank and AITA. And I hope to finish by maybe in 15 minutes. So maybe if you can wrap up 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kasu. So if you go to the next slide, so the components of capacity building, so this is already in the public domain, so I don't want to get into the details of these slides. If you look at the launch of the capacity building from the UNFCCC from COP27, you would identify the different components of capacity building. Like we have identified about 13 components, starting from Article 6 readiness. As I indicated earlier, this is about the integration of Article 6 into the NBC implementation plans and what different activities that we are planning to undertake within this readiness activity is captured in this slide, and the slide is also available. And the public information that we presented as a work plan to parties and the supervisory body is also in the public domain. So let me not repeat that. If you go to the next slide. So these are some of the other components like the Article 6 capacity building library, then Article 6 guidance to facilitate parties' institutional arrangements, oversight arrangements, governance structure, etc. And if you go to the next slide. So these are various other components like a specific hands-on training related to participation and the templates for identifying relevant projects taking into context of the specific country situation for private sector and financial institutions, general awareness raising around Article 6 benefits, organizing Article 6 dialogues, helping once the 6.4 rules, as Kazu said, that we are all working, including the supervisory bodies, working in making the system fully operational by end of this year. So we would be having much more clarity on the process related to registration, different functionalities around the registry, and the transparency and other corresponding adjustment requirements. And by end of this year, we should also be having the final elaborated guidance related to authorization. And then the other part is related to the SD benefits assessment. And this is another area. We have other UN entities which are part of this partnership is also working quite closely on this. I think, and the UNFC Secretariat is again taking up a concept paper on the Article 6, how to do the sustainable development benefit assessment related to Article 6.4 activities. The supervisory body would be considering the concept paper this time. And once we are also in conversation with the other partners who are already working on them, so that when we have this tool approved, then we can roll out specific training around those SD benefit tools. And I also, like I've looked at, quickly glanced the name who are in the participant list of the 123. And I have more than like 50% quite familiar from the previous Kyoto protocol market space. So you might have heard something like the CDM Bazaar, which existed at the peak time of the CDM between 2010 to 2014. So we are also looking at establishing an Article 6 Carbon Bazaar to be like an one-shop solution to look at various information, a platform where two different entities who have interest can map their requirements and needs and try to undertake an activity under Article 6, etc. So that's currently as one of the elements of the capacity building we are looking at them. If you go to the next one, this is basically about the different, like if you put all the outputs, they can be broadly classified as knowledge, products, training, and technical assistance. And if you go to the next slide, basically talks about the timing. So we are looking at two phases, like phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is about the awareness, readiness of the host parties to participate. And then by then, in the first year, 2023, mid of 2024, I'm sure that the supervisory body would have almost all requirements being clearly slated. And then we could have a continuous capacity building around 6.4. And 6.2 will have other challenges related to new types of cooperation in challenging sectors where countries would be engaging in such cooperative approaches. It will have its own embodied reporting, review, and infrastructure related challenges, so which will also be done during the phase 2. If you go to the next slide, here I will take, with the remaining 2 minutes, I will take a bit more time on this. So the first one, within the planning of the capacity building activity within 23-25, by the end of the year, we are looking at coming up with the preparation of a technical handbook on the rules and processes that have been adopted until now. People who were quite familiar with the enhanced transparency framework, you might be aware of the ETF manual that is prepared by the UNFCCC Secretariat. So we have started the conversation with our staff as well as externals in looking at preparing a technical handbook on the various rules and processes, and also looking at over the time to also digitize them over the next year. And then also preparing webinar and reading material on specific topics as modules. I think that is something I think Gebru also talked about. So we are looking, when I said that the Article 6 rules needs to be dissected, for each of those dissected specific components, like there are working groups that has been specified by KAZU that will be established under the Article 6 implementation partnership. So such kind of similar topics, we are in conversation with academic UN agencies and partner countries where we could optimize in what we do, but we wanted to come up with beyond the technical handbook to have specific modules that are capturing the specific sub-elements within the decisions that have been taken in terms of implementation. Then I indicated about a separate work program on transition. We are anticipating that the concept paper that will be presented to the supervisory body in March. So I am not getting into the detail what it is. The annotations of the supervisory body will be published tonight or tomorrow morning. So if you look at the Article 6.4 supervisory body webpage, you will find the 14 activities that we are planning to undertake within this transition work program. You can find them on the web. And then, of course, I'm not elaborating because the supervisory body has to make the decision on this in comparison to others. And then the fourth one, the consultation with parties, specifically through the regional collaboration centers, as part of another program called as SIACA, which is supported by the German government. We have been looking at establishing regional experts on specifically related to Article 6 in all our 6 regional collaboration centers. We do have 3 people on board at this moment. So they would be working directly with specific countries in helping them and facilitating, providing them with expert advice and arranging for research and helping them in making sure that their readiness component is available. And then we are looking at an in-country support for at least 3 countries between 2023 to 25. For this, we are in conversation with certain donor countries, which is to provide direct technical assistance in building the institutional arrangements within the country. So it's basically, you say cradle to wheel, like whatever you say, like, so it is from helping identifying countries through certain criteria who would be requiring those support and sit with them and make sure that they are fully able to be engaged. So we wanted to work with 3 countries, and we are in conversation with donor countries and where we could provide that support. The next slide. In terms of training and workshop, the UNFCCC is planning for about 5 to 7 global or regional workshops, which is basically like Capitalize the Regional Climate Week, other events that is being organized by partner countries, organization and alliance events, the global investment forums, etc. And then country-specific trainings, we are planning for 5. This is like to capitalize with the transparency and finance-related events within the UNFCCC. There's already a calendar that is being slated by the consultative group of experts when it comes to transparency, and they are planning to conduct 4 events over this year. The Standing Committee on Finance is undertaking specific aspects related to markets and nature-based solutions, etc. So we want to also piggyback with them to have an event where in those countries where they are conducting such kind of programs, to also do a deep dive into Article 6 and participation as knowledge partners in various partner workshops. And then an yearly event on global dialogue on NDC implementation and markets, because in the end, we shouldn't forget that we are all working with these markets for 2 primary objectives. One is towards the effective NDC implementation in a cost-effective manner, and the other one is to enhance ambition. So we are also within the capacity building program, we are also looking at a global dialogue and then taking that feedback from those dialogue and then adjust your capacity building plan for the subsequent year. And there is a big chunk of work, which is a mandated training program around the review. So here the UNFCCC would be now reaching out to countries to nominate rosters to be part of the Article 6 review. And we have already started preparing the training materials and also in the process of having training sometime in July, August, and then have examination and qualify certain nominated experts as reviewers, so that as and when the initial reports are submitted by countries, and we are anticipating about 15 to 20 that might come by end of this year. So we will be ready to have experts who can undertake the Article 6 review. So this is a separate mandated activity beyond the broader capacity building we are also working on within the Secretariat. And then last but not least, we are also trying to prepare an interactive toolbox on the institutional arrangements. This is again something people who are very experienced in the enhanced transparency framework in Article 13, working on Article 13, would be aware of the interactive toolbox that exists for ETF. So we are planning to develop something similar in Article 6. Thank you so much for your patience. Back to you, Kasu. I know I took a long time, but I hope that this is useful by everyone to know what UNFCCC is planning for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think indeed this is really useful information, and which will be also beneficial to everybody. And I just wanted to also thank UNFCCC Secretariat to prepare all these very comprehensive. At the same time, it's a very lot of work to do. But at the same time, I think we hope that this work, I think when it comes to the implementation on the ground, I think we definitely need to discuss about how we can effectively implement. And I see the kind of same directions. And particularly survey results also shows related to the reporting, institutional arrangement, authorization, and also understanding Article 6, both in 6.2 context as well as 6.4. I think that was also mentioned. And also particularly the 6.4 capacity building. You mentioned about the transition is one, and also development of baseline is another. So we'll come back on this as we move forward. And also the review preparation. This is also another very important areas. In this context, I think many technical experts from this partnership can really contribute, and we will be benefiting from this training. So. So Perma, if I may allow, just move on to.
No, I would hardly take 5 seconds or 10 seconds to just to. I forgot one to respond to Gareth. So from Sharm el Sheikh, we also have a mandate which says that under Article 6A to look for capacity building for 6.8 when offering to the other instruments within Article 6 to see whether 6.8 could be done. So we are actually we are actually planning when we do the regional forums, not at the country level, but when we do that first part of the training and workshop around the regional forum level, global regional forum, we would dedicate a session related to Article 6.8. So that's what I wanted to, I just forgot in response to Gary's question. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think it's very also important point. So with that, I wanted to move on to the next presentation by the Harry, by the World Bank. And as you know, that the World Bank is doing quite important capacity building, particularly domestic context from the Partnership for Market Implementation and the Climate Market Club that is also related to many related areas on this Article 6 areas. And I know that there is also related to the tracking database that World Bank is also working. So I just hand over to Harry for your overview of the presentation. And thanks very much for today's participating from the early morning from US.
Thank you so much, Kaju, and also thanks for the opportunity for presenting what the World Bank is doing related to the Article 6 capacity building activities. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. So next slide, please. So the World Bank's the support are related to, of course, both the carbon pricing instruments and also carbon markets for under the facility called Partnership for Market Implementation Facility. I'm sure some of you might be aware of this thing. So with a broader objective of supporting countries both with readiness and implementation of explicit carbon pricing policies, be it ETS and carbon tax, but also catalyzing the development of next generation of international carbon markets. So the facility, of course, deliver these objectives through 4 modes of assistance, like advisory, advocacy, innovation, and the knowledge services. If you see the most of the work that we do, helping countries to implement and then, of course, getting prepared for participating in the international carbon markets, of course, happens through the innovation pillar, under which we do a lot of innovation related to developing the new methodologies, of course, helping countries with different things that Perumal has outlined in his presentation. And then, of course, the working with the different governments to strengthen their capacities, ensuring that there will be a proper coordination between different line ministries, and especially the role of the Ministry of Financing in terms of advocacy and then the advisory of these efforts at the domestic level. And then, of course, we have a knowledge services under which we develop a lot of knowledge that, of course, you are very much familiar with the work that World Bank did in the last couple of decades, especially in the carbon markets and carbon pricing and different initiatives. And then we continue to do that one under this PMIF as well. Next slide, please. When it comes to the specifically the type of the work that we do under the carbon markets, it falls under these 4 windows or 4 different work streams, starting with creating the emission reduction credits, and mainly using the World Bank lending operations. And then, of course, we do a lot of work related to supporting countries with having a necessary infrastructure at the domestic level, and also, of course, facilitating the transparency at the global level through the development of necessary end-to-end digital ecosystem through mainly the Climate Warehouse program. And then, of course, in order to also facilitate monetizing these generated emission reduction credits, looking into the aspects and to catalyze the demand, what the risks that, of course, both from the seller and the buyers will face, and what kind of mitigation measure that should be put in place through different innovative instruments, as that will be, of course, done under the monetizing ERC pillar. And then, of course, the funds like Scale, which are, of course, aiming to develop such kind of approaches. And then underpinning all of these things, of course, there is a cross-cutting work program in which we do the capacity building, and then to facilitate the establishment of the enabling environment at the domestic level, especially through development of the regulatory framework, institutional setups, and the necessary governing arrangements, etc., which will be, of course, done mainly through the Partnership for Market Implementation facility, PMI, under which, of course, we are helping 17 countries right now, both with the implementation of the domestic carbon pricing market, but also helping them to participate in the international carbon markets. Of course, we have a climate market club, as Kazu-san mentioned, which I will discuss in a minute, and then, of course, the technical assistance through various funds. Next slide. This is, of course, the same thing that what I just mentioned. Of course, this is how actually it looks like, how different funds that we have fit into the overall objective, right from the conceptualization to, of course, prototyping and then implementations and the scale up. So mainly the Climate Market Club, Warehouse, of course, Invest for Climate, and then have a carbon market platform. So there are several initiatives, of course, that all the information related to this is available on website, which I will share at the end. Helping them basically with the conceptualization, the prototyping, and then we use of course, the PMI as the main vehicle to implement and then scale up the innovation that happens in other funds, and then, of course, the scale facility where under which we purchase, of course, the result emission reduction units through the results-based financing to mainly to scale up the financing needs that the countries need to implement the mitigation projects. Next slide. So to summarize, of course, like how we do the work at the individual country level, I'm sure, of course, you're all familiar with based on what has already been discussed and presented earlier. So based on our experience with working with several countries, I think these are the main activities that countries are looking, establishing a country level policy framework, mainly to define what's the country's direction is and the check is, and how they wanted to implement the international carbon markets and support the private sector at the domestic level by establishing a needed policy framework. Of course, you have seen the Ghana coming up with a very detailed policy framework recently, and there are several countries that are working on this similarly. And then, of course, country of Jordan has published a draft policy framework very recently. And then, of course, there is also Article 6 strategy, under which, as Perumal mentioned, so countries wanted to understand, like, which sectors to be participate, and then which are the positive, negative activities that country wanted to identify, which organization and which ministry will play a particular role. So that all comes under Article 6 strategy. And then, of course, the most importantly, which is not very much focused in many of the countries, is the pricing strategy, which, of course, again, very essential for countries to understand, given that they have their own NDC to meet. So what is the opportunity cost for countries to meet their NDC, and hence, how do we actually incentivize the private sector to participate in the market, but at the same time to ensure that our country is not at the loss of not meeting their NDC in the future. So under this pricing strategy, of course, countries will look into the abatement costs in each sector, and then, of course, the NDC implementation costs, and then come up with a strategy that is suitable for that particular country context. And then, of course, the infrastructure strategy. I mean, it's like, again, depending on the country needs, capacity, and then, of course, sustainability of establishing such systems at the domestic level. For this talks about, like, what is the country's approach when it comes to whether having MRV, national MRV systems, or the registry systems, or make use of the other infrastructure that is available at the global level. So that strategy talks about all these aspects. And then, of course, there is a capacity building strategy, basically looking into what the capacity building needs of the country and the different stakeholders, and then devising a strategy and then implementing it with the support of the different partners. So bank, of course, is helping countries to have all these strategies, and then, of course, develop the policy framework through different initiatives that I just showed you in previous slides. Next slide. This is, of course, one very important initiative that, of course, bank started a little more than 2 years ago, with the Climate Market Club. Of course, here we gather the like-minded countries that are either already implementing some kind of Article 6 related activities, or wanted to do such kind of things in the future, but understand, like, what the key technical aspects when it comes to their implementation, and what lessons that they can learn from others. We have, of course, 13 countries right now, and then two more countries just joined, Namibia and Thailand, to the list, making it to the total 15 countries. And then also we have a 9 non-primary members. These are the organizations that are helping these primary members to implement the Article 6 related activities. World Bank, along with other MDBs, act jointly as a secretariat to this club. The club pretty much meets once in every month. So far, we met, I think, 23 times. One of the key activities under the Climate Market Club is the development of what we call as approach papers. We have developed, I think, almost like 9 or 10 approach papers so far, covering different technical aspects related to the Article 6. All approach papers that are published are available on the Climate Warehouse website. You can go and then, of course, read those reports, which are very concise, and then with clear guidance to countries on how to basically look into different technical things. Next slide. And then this is, of course, mainly coming to the end-to-end digital ecosystem, of course, where the bank is trying to help countries to look into different infrastructure requirements, right from the digital MRV at the project level to the national MRV that, of course, captures all the information related to the mitigation activities at the country level and calculate the emissions and emission reductions, linking to the national inventory system, so that the countries will have a clarity on how they are doing in the different sectors, and also facilitate independent validation and verification. And then, of course, the national registry systems, which, of course, the countries, depending on the need and then capacity, and establish the processes, they can, of course, issue the MOs, and then, of course, also authorize and then transfer to other country registries. And then, of course, and then connecting to the climate action data trust that, of course, I'm sure many of you familiar, and then which I'm assuming that IETA will talk a little bit more about that thing, where, of course, all the country registries and then exchanges and then independent standards can be connected, and then so that all the information related to the carbon market of transactions will be available at one single place. Under this one, of course, we have established a Digital for Climate working group that is in collaboration with the EBRD, UNDP, UNFCCC, and then World Bank, where we are trying to develop a modular approaches for different components I just mentioned, so that countries, depending on their need, pick and then choose, and then, of course, ensure there is a interoperability between these different modules, and to facilitate the carbon market transactions. Next slide, please. For this is basically what it looks like. I mean, like, starting with the digital MRV systems, and then connecting to the national registries, and then we are also working on the tokenization of the credits right now and prototyping. And then, of course, that all this will be connected, and then all the information will be made available in the Climate Action Data Trust, which we launched late last year. Next slide. So this is, of course, the calendar of events that World Bank is planning, of course, for this calendar year, for starting with the technical workshop on international carbon markets in the month of March in Rwanda. And then, of course, we are also planning to do a number of things in the margins of I4C, and also as part of the I4C, including the PMI Knowledge Forum, and then the PMI workshops in I4C. And then we also do a regional training on different things, starting with, of course, the on ETS training for Western Balkans. And then, of course, we are planning to do also similarly in other regions in this calendar year. Not just only, and of course, on the carbon pricing, but also carbon markets. And then, of course, as usual, of course, like we do a lot of workshops and then events on international conferences, and then events like Substra meetings, and then all the regional climate weeks, New York Climate Week, and then, of course, and the COP itself. So this in nutshell, of course, summarizes what the bank is currently doing on when it comes to the, of course, helping countries on international carbon markets, not just only the, of course, doing the trainings and then workshops, but also helping countries with, establishing all the things that are needed in, for them to, participate in the international carbon markets. The next slide, of course, shows all the links and the resources that the bank has on these things that I just mentioned. Please feel free to look into the information that is already available, and then we are happy to answer and then clarify any questions. I'll stop here. Thank you so much for the opportunity once again. Thanks. Over to you, Kajis.
Thank you, Hari, again for your very comprehensive presentation. And I also learned that I think one of the strengths of the World Bank is that you have already engaged with many countries under the PMI framework, as well as the Climate Market Club and the Climate Warehouse, where you have already started implementing already a couple of activities. So I found that the country level policy framework, which is really useful in those who are currently considering how to develop their own institutional framework, Article 6 strategies, and then infrastructure strategies. And you mentioned about carbon pricing strategy. I think all of these elements are very important for many countries. So probably it will be needed to maybe extend to, of course, including the existing ones, as well as the new, those who are interested in joining Article 6. So, and also, we look forward to more collaborating the in-person meeting, which you are also organizing PMI Council and I4C events and the Regional Climate Week and so on. So maybe we need to take that advantage as much as we could so that we can incorporate as more regional activities as possible to really replicate what we have right now. And also, I think the approach paper you have developed in Climate Market Club, I think this is something it could be also used as a reference materials when it comes to many countries are still strategizing themselves, understanding what that means in terms of Article 6 decisions and so on. So I think maybe we need to probably create a library of those resources. Of course, not limited to the World Bank, but also with others to really create a resources package. So many thanks for that. I like to strengthen our cooperation and looking forward to real actual implementation of the capacity building together with World Bank. So with this, I'd like to move on to this next presentation from Aita. Andrea, thanks for waiting. And of course, Aita, as you know, that representing the private sectors, and looking forward to hearing from you about how you intend to approach private sector's involvement for the Article 6 capacity building, and how we can collaborate in terms of our work for the successful implementation of the Article 6. So with this, I hand over to Andrea.
Thank you very much, Kazu. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. As Kazu said, I'm here representing AITA, a private sector organization with over 300 members. And I prepared a slide describing the reasons behind the interest of the private sector in Article 6. And then I'll describe our existing activities in the realm of Article 6 capacity building and support to market formation. So if we move to the next slide, I have a visual describing the reasons behind private sector interest in Article 6, which is really high. AITA membership has been growing, and the level of participation of our members in activities related to Article 6 has been growing steadily since the successful outcome of COP26. So first of all, the private sector is looking for investment opportunities in mitigation projects, projects that reduce emissions and generate carbon credits, represent opportunities for companies active in various sectors. Then there's an element of access to cheaper abatement options for companies that have obligations under a domestic carbon tax or a cap and trade scheme. Not all of these schemes allow the use of international credits as offsets, but some do. And generally, the increase in the number of carbon prices schemes worldwide and the increase in prices within many of these schemes have prompted a very strong interest for access to mitigation options internationally. And finally, the third reason for which the private sector is looking at Article 6 with great interest is the emergence and the growth of voluntary emission reduction objectives. These are targets that companies voluntarily set for themselves. And there's a number of initiative and guidelines that monitor the implementation of these objectives. And there's a share of these reduction objectives that can be met through the use of international offsets, and because of the growth in these targets, there has been growth into private sector interest in international offsets. So I'm just describing this briefly, but I also say that because of the multiple reasons of the private sector for engaging in Article 6, it's important that Article 6 schemes are designed in a certain way that allow for this private sector participation. So they allow private companies to take title of carbon credits, and they allow for the integration of Article 6 with existing voluntary crediting programs and voluntary schemes. That said, in the next slide, I'll have a summary of the ongoing initiatives that we are conducting at AITA. First, we have the BPMI, which is the Business Partnership for Market Implementation. We heard about the World Bank's PMI, and this is we see this as the private sector companion, a parallel initiative run by the private sector and targeting the private sector primarily. Then we have the Climate Action Data Trust. Again, something mentioned in the previous presentation by the World Bank. AITA is a partner with the World Bank and the government of Singapore. And I'll say a few words about this project, and which has been launched in December last year, and what it plans to achieve for carbon markets and Article 6 implementation. Then I'll say a few words about the economic modeling in partnership with academic institutions that AITA has been conducting for almost 3 years now. And finally, I'll describe the recent publication of ERPA contract templates, so legal documents that countries and companies can use when trading emission reductions and removals. So next I have the BPMI, so the business PMI. This has been launched last year with a soft launch, and it aims at promoting public-private dialogue and business-led capacity building on carbon market and Article 6. So building bridges of knowledge between the government and the business community, but also between different sectors and geographies within the private sector. We aim at synergizing with the World Bank, leveraging on the good work they're doing, and providing private sector perspective on the topics the PMI is working on. And the fact that the activity is business-led makes it unique and differentiates it from other capacity building programs and initiatives that are being conducted. In the next slide, I have some photos from 3 workshops we run last year. in Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil. By no means the activity is limited to these countries or to the Latin American region. And for 2023, we are targeting similar workshops and activities in at least one Asian and one African country. And I'll be happy to share more information bilaterally with those who are interested in this. So next, the Climate Action Data Trust. The World Bank spoke a bit about this. It's a metadata layer or a meta registry that collects information from the different country registries, or even registries from the independent standards that agree to accept to connect and participate in this project. And this will provide access to standardized data from multiple sources that then can be used by public or private actors to build services on the basis of this data. The Climate Action Data Trust will be freely accessible. It is a public good that will be delivered to the market. And as I said, it has been launched, and it's some registries have been connected, and we still welcome interest from countries that haven't connected their registry yet, or as it is the case for many countries, they are starting to develop their national Article 6 registry. So this we believe connection to the Climate Action Data Trust will provide the market with the necessary certainty around data quality and transparency, and will be conducive to success of Article 6 plans that countries may have. I have another slide on the Climate Action Data Trust, and it describes where the Climate Action Data Trust sits within the digital ecosystem that the World Bank is working on. And Hari said a few words about this, so I don't need to spend time on this. Next, economic modeling. So as I said, we launched this research in 2019 in partnership with the University of Maryland and Pacific Northwest National Lab. And we run several scenarios using the GCAM model, which is one of the models used in IPCC assessments. I describe here some of the different scenarios we run, but then the outputs of these scenarios are clearly show the benefits in terms of carbon reductions and investment flows and revenues that the countries can have when engaging in Article 6. In the next slide, I have links to the two papers that have been published as part of this project. One was published in 2019, one in 2021. We also regularly run workshops under the Chatham House rules. I expect many of the people joining this workshop are on our list of invitees, but if you're not and you're interested, again, please feel free to get in touch. And the process is ongoing. We're working on new scenarios, new reports, and for this year and next year, we'd like to run workshop and academic symposia focusing on individual countries and regions, and we welcome expressions of interest for this type of work. Finally, the fourth activity is trading documents. So these are contract templates, templates for legal agreements for the trade of emission reductions or emission removals. And we've published 4 documents between last September and this month. So one is for primary transactions between a country and a buyer. Then there's 2 documents for secondary trading, and there's a guidance document that looks at some of the risks for countries and the private sector. If you, I assume you will receive this deck, so you can click on each of the pictures at the bottom of the slide and get the direct link. As for the other activities I described, these are freely accessible and public available. So feel free to review and feel free to reach out to AITA if you have further questions. As part of this work stream on legal work, we are considering further work on a model legislative framework the countries can use when setting up their domestic framework. We're still at the early stages, and we are still gauging the level of interest from countries and the specific angles that the countries would find more useful. So as for the other activities, we welcome feedback and partners. And I believe that was the last slide, and I'm happy to stop here and welcome questions. Thank you.